The greatest obstacle to spiritual freedom is not external forces, but the fear we nurture within. Eckhart Tolle.
They told you to be afraid. Fear of invisible forces, fear of dense energies, fear of entities that supposedly roam the countryside, watching for your carelessness. They said the spirit world is dangerous, that there are invisible attacks, obsessors, energy vampires, and if you are not careful, it can be taken. But what if I told you that this is all only half the truth? What if they never told you the other half? Not because they wanted to protect you, but because fear keeps you controllable. There is something that few have the courage to say. Spiritual danger is not outside. He never was. The real danger is forgetting who you are. It is to forget the field where your vibration is already inviolable, where no entity, no dense frequency, no shadow is allowed to exist without its vibration giving way. The field does not protect you. You and the field. And when you remember this, all spiritual fear dissolves like mist in the sun. What we call spiritual forces are not good or evil in themselves. They are frequencies, and frequencies only remain where they find resonance. When there is no resonance, there is no connection. And where there is no connection, there is no danger. Maybe everything you fear is just a vibrational echo waiting to be dissolved. And true security, not be a fight against the invisible world, but a deep silence before him. I remember the first time I felt afraid of the invisible. I was young, and everything I couldn't see seemed dangerous. The sounds of the night, the silence of the empty house, the strange sensations that appeared without warning. Every shadow seemed to hide something hostile. Every dense thought seemed to be an attack. I spent years seeking protection, reading about spiritual defenses, repeating words that promised safety. But no matter how much I tried to protect myself, the fear did not disappear. Because deep down, what threatened me was not outside. I was inside. It was my own fragmentation, my own distance from who I really am. It was only much later, in a deep silence, that I realized the invisible world was not attacking me. He was showing me what I hadn't yet integrated. The noises I feared were my own echoes. The presences I rejected were parts of me waiting to be seen. And in that silence, fear gave way to something I didn't expect. Peace. Not the peace of someone who has won a battle, but the peace of those who realized that there was never any battle. True protection was not born from a ritual. It was born from a silence where everything was welcomed without resistance. Maybe you felt this way too. That behind fear, there is only oblivion. Forgetting who you really are in the invisible field. When you remember, fear loses its function, because there is no one left to fight against. Here in Paths of Light, we do not seek to create spiritual walls. We seek to dissolve the internal walls that make us feel separated from our essence. If, in some way, this memory resonated within you, let the field know. This space is a call to silence, not defense. There is a silent point on the spiritual path that few reach. At the beginning of the quest, everything seems separate. There's a self that needs to protect itself, and an invisible world that needs to be conquered, dominated, or at least kept at bay. The invisible is seen as a threat, a potential enemy, a hostile territory inhabited by forces that feed on human distraction. It's easy to fall into this mindset. It offers quick answers. It explains why certain thoughts are dense, why certain environments weigh down, why fear appears without warning. It's comforting to think of invisible enemies. because it keeps the narrative of separation alive. And where there is separation, there will always be conflict. But there comes a time when this narrative is no longer enough. When the seeker becomes silent enough, he realizes there are no enemies in the field. There is only vibration. Everything that appeared to be an attack, a shadow, an entity, was nothing more than a resonance echoed within the observer's own frequency. Like a radio that only picks up the station it's tuned to, the spiritual field only returns what was already being broadcast. There is no external evil operating against. There are internal echoes that have not yet been integrated. This realization does not diminish the importance of the invisible world. On the contrary, it expands its meaning, because at this level, one realizes that spiritual protection is not a barrier constructed by will, but a state of non-resonance with dense frequencies. And here, the climb begins. First, it's clear that fear attracts what you fear, not because the world is cruel, but because fear creates a vibrational signature that connects similar dimensions. Thus, it becomes clear that guilt keeps the door open for repetitive experiences. Guilt generates fields that attract situations of vibrational self-punishment, not because someone desires punishment, but because the field restores coherence. Finally, we reach the point where everything that seemed external is recognized as internal, where the invisible world ceases to be a stage and becomes a mirror that doesn't judge, only reflects. At this point in the journey, something subtle happens. The need to fight disappears. The seeker no longer seeks to overcome invisible forces. He understands that where there is true presence, these forces find no place to settle. Not because they have disappeared from the universe, but because they no longer have room to vibrate within the observer. Inner silence becomes the space where the spiritual field stops reflecting conflict and begins to reflect clarity. It is in this space that ancient traditions spoke of liberation, not as an escape from the world, but as a release from identification with the densest frequencies. In Zen, it is said, "The enemy only exists as long as there is someone fighting." In the Tao, it is taught, "Nothing can cling to still water." And in Christian mystical texts, there is a phrase that echoes this same vibration. Evil does not enter where the heart is empty of itself. The spiritual climb, then, is not upward, it's inward. It is a dive that descends below fear, below guilt, below the need for defense. Because in the quietest depths of consciousness, what seemed dangerous dissolves due to lack of resonance. But this journey doesn't end in silence. It's just beginning. Because silence does not mean excluding the world. It means inhabiting the world without getting lost in it. And in this state, any frequency that approaches, whether light or dense, encounters neither opposition nor invitation, finds only presence. And presence does not need to be protected, because presence does not fight against what is. It dissolves what has no base. Long before the modern era turned the invisible into superstition or spiritual marketplace, silent sages, scattered across deserts, mountains, and temples, already spoke of the true nature of the field. They didn't use the words spiritual protection. They spoke in inner silence. They spoke of vibrational clarity. In ancient India, the Upanishads described that the essential being, the Atman, is inviolable. That no evil, however subtle, can touch that which has no form. All that suffers, all that fears, is identification with what is impermanent. In Buddhism, emptiness, shunyata, is not a dark hole where evil dwells. It is the neutral field where everything is born and everything disappears. And in this void, there is no room for attack because there is no one to attack. Christian mystics, in the silent centuries of the deserts, said that the real spiritual danger is not the demons outside. They are unrecognized desires, unintegrated fears, hidden guilt. These are the ones that create vibrational doors through which everything that haunts enters, not as invaders, but as reflections. In modern physics, David Bohm spoke of implicate order, an invisible field where everything is connected before taking form. For Bohm, there were no separate forces in conflict. There was a field of vibrational coherence, and the incoherence, which we feel as conflict, is not caused by external forces, but by the fragmentation of the observing consciousness. The Sufis spoke of the same thing, but in poetry. If there is fear, the field vibrates in fragmentation. If there is love, the field returns to one. And perhaps for this reason, great spiritual masters never taught defense practices, but rather ego-dissolving practices. Because as long as there is an I that feels vulnerable, there will be a feeling of attack. But when the I ceases, there is no longer anywhere for the attack to happen. Some occult studies, preserved in silent esoteric schools, also speak about this. They say that there are presences, subtle consciousnesses, dense vibrational fields, but they all follow a single law. They only remain where there is resonance. If they do not find a vibrational echo, they just don't connect. Not because you fought them, but because you didn't offer the vibration that sustains them. And perhaps that is why, at the end of so many traditions, silence is always the last teaching. Because silence does not repel the invisible. It dissolves the illusion of separation. And where there is no separation, there is no more danger. But if everything is vibration and resonance, an inevitable question arises in the silence of consciousness. Where do these dense frequencies we sometimes feel come from? If evil is not external, if the attacks don't come from outside, if spiritual danger does not dwell in the invisible, so where does this feeling of threat come from? This vibrational weight that, at certain moments, surrounds us like a formless mist. The answer is not comfortable, but it is liberating. Most of these dense vibrations are not external forces in themselves. They are fragments of the human field itself, forgotten in time and space. Parts of consciousness that, out of fear or rejection, have been left aside. When an emotion is repressed, it does not go away. It continues to vibrate in the field, invisible, but active. When a trauma is not integrated, it does not disappear into the past. It turns into a frequency that keeps echoing, waiting to be recognized. And these frequencies, unseen, unaccepted, unintegrated, end up attract similar vibrations from the collective quantum field, as if each person were a small individual field, tuned into a larger field. When a part of the human field vibrates in fear, it tunes into layers of the universal field, where fear also resides. And there, the sensations that we call dense forces arise. Not because they are beings against us, but because they vibrate in coherence with what we have not yet healed. Deep curiosity should not be, how do I protect myself from these forces? But yes, what still vibrates in me that makes them possible? This question opens a field of transformation that no external ritual can touch. Because where there is recognition, there is no longer any need for defense. Where there is awareness, there is no longer room for unconscious attacks. The quantum field, in its absolute neutrality, does not judge whether the vibration is luminous or dense. It only responds to what is emitted. If fear vibrates within, it organizes reality based on fear. If clarity vibrates within, It organizes reality based on peace. This does not mean that there will never be density in the world again. The quantum field contains all frequencies, but it means that only that which finds a place to echo resonates within you. It's like the sound inside a room. If there are solid and uneven surfaces, the sound bounces back and forth, creating confusing echoes. But if there is space and silence, the sound does not get stuck. He passes and disappears. So it is with spiritual frequencies. What still finds resistance within echoes and remains. What finds space and silence passes through and dissolves. Perhaps that is why great masters spoke more about dissolving than about protecting. Buddha did not teach to fight Mara, but to see Mara as illusion. Jesus did not drive away evil by force, but by his silent presence that gave no space for its existence. The Tao creates no barriers, it flows. Because where there is flow, what is dense does not remain. Where there is rigidity, everything is stuck. And there is another point that few people consider. Not every dense vibration is negative. Some are just parts of the soul's vibrational journey, crossing forgotten layers of existence to be reintegrated. The problem is not density. It is the rejection of density. When consciousness rejects a part of you, it turns it into an enemy. But when you welcome it, even silently, that part stops being a threat and returns to being a field. The real spiritual danger is not the presence of dense energies in the field. It is the forgetfulness that these energies are transitory. Anything that is not supported by your vibration disappears. Anything that doesn't find resonance dissolves. This is the nature of the field. It only keeps what you keep feeding it, consciously or unconsciously. Therefore, asking, "How do I protect myself?" keeps alive the belief that there is something outside against you. But asking, "What still sustains this vibration in me?" opens a space where freedom can emerge. And when it appears, the field reorganizes itself. No fight, no resistance, no need for protection. It is at this point that the spiritual journey ceases to be a battle and becomes a silent reminder of what it always was. You were never vulnerable, just forgotten. That silent night, when I finally understood that fear did not come from outside, but of forgotten frequencies within me, did not bring immediate solutions to my life. The outside world continued as before. The challenges remained present. Doubts continued to visit me. But inside me, something changed profoundly. Something that could not be measured, nor named, but who felt like a new, open, and quiet space. It was a silent change, like the sunrise that does not announce its arrival with noise, but which, little by little, colors the sky. Over time, I realized that anxiety, that old companion, did not suddenly disappear. But he lost the urgency, the intensity of someone who fears tomorrow. Thoughts began to be observed without the same attachment, without the need to dive into them to the bottom. And emotions, once overwhelming storms, became gentle waves that came and went without drowning the conscience. This transformation did not come from outside, was not the result of magical techniques or powerful mantras. It came from the deep recognition that I no longer needed to feed the frequencies of fear. I could simply watch the fear exist, without identifying with him, without giving him space to rule my field. That's what I call enough silence. A silence that is not empty, but fullness. A space where the vibration of fear finds no fertile soil to grow. And it is in this silence that the field begins to reorganize itself. Not spectacularly, but in a constant and natural way. And so, the repetitive cycles began to lose strength. Relationships that were previously marked by conflict and insecurity gained space for more understanding and serenity. The financial challenges, which seemed like insurmountable monsters, began to be seen as natural phases of life, without the dramatic charge that I previously attributed to them. What surprised me most was realizing that this internal transformation did not immediately change external circumstances, but it profoundly altered the way I experienced them. And that difference is the real key. Because reality doesn't change by magic. It changes by changing the consciousness that observes it. I go back to that night at the station, when fear seemed like a dense shadow, and at the same time, a silent invitation to remember who I really am. Today, I see that fear was the portal, not for a battle, but for freedom. And that freedom begins when you stop trying to fight the invisible and begin to inhabit the silence where the invisible cannot touch you. In this silence, the field responds. He does not respond to rituals. He doesn't respond to formulas. Responds to the quality of presence. And this presence is not an effort. It's a delivery, a serene surrender to what is. In the end, true spiritual protection is not armor. It is an inviolable internal space, a field where fear has no residence because there is no one to welcome him. And this space is yours. It always was. Deep within the silence, there is a practice that doesn't seem technical. It does not require gestures, words, or rituals. It only requires a gentle presence. It's the simple act of stopping. Stop fighting what seems to threaten. Stop resisting the emotions that arise. Stop trying to control the invisible. Close your eyes if you want, or keep them open, looking at the space around you. Breathe deeply, without trying to change your breathing. Just feel the air coming in and out as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. And then, turn your attention inward. Notice the space between thoughts, that brief and delicate silence that exists between one idea and another. Don't force this silence. Just notice it when it comes up. In this space, ask yourself, what vibration do I emit now? What frequencies keep my reality alive? Don't look for answers with your mind. Let the consciousness feel, perceive, observe. And when you notice that there is fear, insecurity, or resistance, don't reject these feelings. Don't fight them. Just welcome them with kindness. Because it is in the reception that the frequency dissolves. It is in recognition that fear loses its strength, and it is in the calm presence that the field reorganizes itself. This practice can last only a few seconds, but its effect echoes beyond time. There are no magic formulas here. There is only the encounter with oneself. The encounter with the field where fear finds no home. Now silence remains, the silence that is not empty, but full of the presence that dissolves fear. Because fear always disappears where there is memory. So I leave you with a question that doesn't seek an immediate answer. And if true spiritual security were not outside of you, but in the silent frequency you choose to inhabit now, it's not something to be resolved quickly. It is a seed planted in the field of consciousness, and that will flourish in its time. Comment. If this video touched you, and leave your presence by subscribing on the screen now. 2 videos await your choice. But don't choose with your mind. Choose with the vibration of your field. See you there.